YouTubers, this video will be looking at Daredevil Born Again. I saw the original series in Daredevil that came out in 2015. Charlie Cox, an English actor, plays Matt Murdock, the son of a crooked boxer that has a change of heart about fixing fights and decides not to, and it gets tragically killed by the Kingpin, like back before he was top crime boss. And in season 1 we have Daredevil before he wears the red suit. He's there with that classic look with the black outfit, half of this handkerchief covering his face. And by the end we get to see Matt Murdock getting into the Daredevil suit and fighting against the Kingpin, because season 1 is setting up Matt's story against the Kingpin and the origins. So the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, is played by Vincent D'Onofrio, and by the end of season 1 Kingpin ends up getting arrested. And we have season 2, we get the introduction of Frank Castle the Punisher, played by John Bernthal. Wow, really bad with names. And also we get the introduction of Elektra Natchios, played by Elodie Young. So season 2 is kind of like setting up for the Defenders. Now anybody that saw the Defenders know it was like, it had promise. And the one character I did not like was Iron Fist, but that's going off topic. And we get the mention of the Hand, which is comic book related. And in season 2 we also see the character of Stick, Daredevil's mentor. And of course the whole idea of season 2 is like 2 parts. The first one talking about Frank and his idea of justice and about the whole thing of vigilantes. Some people need to be killed for their crimes. And we get that famous prison breakout scene with Frank in the castle and Frank in the castle, Frank in the prison with the Kingpin, and the Kingpin ends up orchestrating the Punisher's release. And of course at the end of season 2 Elektra dies, and we get the ending. I can't even remember the ending of season 2, but before season 3 came about we had the series of the Defenders, in which the whole idea of the Hand, Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and who else am I missing? I think that's it. And of course, like maybe the reporters on the side of like Karen, and there's also Foggy. And then at the end of the Defender series, Matt was fighting against a resurrected Elektra. Apparently Elektra was like the key to God knows what. And they both and Matt ends up having a whole building collapse on top of him, and of course Elektra ends up getting missing. And season 3, let's say, it's what happens to Matt Murdock after the events of season 2. He ends up washed ashore in the New York harbor by the sewage. He's like half dead, half alive. Of course the building fell on top of him, so he asks one of the building workers find him, and he asks to be taken to the orphanage where he grew up as a child, an orphanage, a Catholic orphanage. And part of season 3 is Matt's recovery, and of course his trauma of losing Elektra in that way. First she was alive, and then again, then she gets killed. But let's say missing in action, no body, no death. That's how in this TV show goes about. And of course we get that surprising revelation. I don't know in Daredevil Born Again will they touch on the big revelation. If you haven't seen season 3, skip a part or don't carry on watching this video. That the nun in the church that helps Matt to recuperate is actually his mom. I was like, oh, okay, what a way to tie in more his Catholic faith. So through flashbacks, I like season 3, you get to see more of Matt's origins, about his mom and his dad. That Matt's mom was like a trainee nun at the time, I think it was. She was obviously young. She sees Matt's dad fighting in a boxing match. They fall in love. She leaves the order. She has a baby, and we get the sense that she got postnatal depression, probably like having the baby, her inner conflict with her faith, and she ends up leaving the baby with Matt's dad, and she ends up returning to the church. Now the priest that was almost like Matt's surrogate father, I can't remember his name, probably put it here, the name of the priest. He ends up dying in season 3, but not before telling Matt that obviously he knows he's Daredevil, and Daredevil Matt has heightened senses. That's the classic feature despite being blind. He tells Matt to forgive him, and of course by season 3 we end up with Kingpin. Obviously he came out from prison, there were always technicalities, and by the end of it he ends up going back to prison. And of course there's that whole thing of Vanessa. And end of season 3, I don't talk about the character Foggy. He's an okay character. I can understand the connections between Matt and of course Foggy. They're basically brothers. Matt has no other siblings. So at the end of season 3 that the whole gang reunited, because season 3 Matt was apart. He was basically very depressed about a lot of things in life and probably didn't want to carry on living a normal life. So by the end of season 3, Karen, Foggy and Matt, they're together, they're happy, and they're like, oh okay, we'll start again for fresh. Now we have the whole thing of the blip of Thanos disappearing half the world, and the understanding probably Kingpin and the Daredevil were part of that. Because when we get the first introduction back of Daredevil, he first appeared in She-Hulk. We know the reviews about that were really to me was kind of random. Not random, both of them are lawyers, but the whole premise like, oh, okay. And of course we have, before She-Hulk, Charlie Cox did that cameo as Matt Murdock in, was it Spider-Man Home, like the last one that came out, that he's like the lawyer for Peter Parker. Now that's interesting. So Daredevil Born Again, we finally get to the crux of the series. It went through, when the rights for these characters got expired with Netflix, Disney took it all back. And of course, at that time, Disney was launching Disney Plus. So skip forward, let's say 5 years, and now we have the series of Born Again. First of all, there was a controversy that it was going to rewrite everything and do something completely different. And then thank God Disney and the people that had made a lot of sense knowing that they got the series from Netflix. Well, they got what Netflix and whoever team established the series. And the reason why it was so popular, it was very like a mature content, talked about a lot of social issues, and of course had the violence aspect. So Disney listened and they scrapped what they originally had and they decided to do as a continuation. But in the sense that, from my understanding, 7 years has elapsed from season 3, and in the first episode they kill off, spoiler alert, they kill off Foggy. Bullseye comes back into the picture, what I'm glad about. And when Karen, Foggy and Matt are drinking in their pub that they always go to, or the bar, there's like a shootout and Bullseye is there hoping, basically to cause mayhem. So Matt goes into the suit, he's chasing after Bullseye, and at the same time there's Foggy there, because Foggy has at the time, one thing I think they will reveal, what was the case that Foggy was working on, in which he was hiding a whistleblower, which whoever hired Bullseye to go and shoot him, because at the end of episode 1 of the new series, unfortunately Foggy ends up dying. I've been seeing some kind of like comic book related things that maybe Foggy faked his death. Could be not, but what a sad scene, because at that end, Matt, as Daredevil, already stabbed up by the fight of Bullseye, and Bullseye in his hands, he decides in that moment just to throw him off the roof. Now at the end of season 3, we see that Bullseye had a special operation on his spine because he got Matt beaten up severely by Daredevil. I'll put in the scenes here of like the cause for his injury. So what they did to him, we have yet to find out, because for him to survive, God knows, from a tall cathedral being pushed off by Matt, you'd think he would have died on impact, something along the lines, but he survived. And of course he was survived long enough to have a court trial in which Matt was there. And episode 1, we kind of see the separation of Karen. Now Karen's reasons for disappearing, I don't understand. She seems very evasive. Maybe that she knows something more that what went on. And the big part of this series is after the blip and Hawkeye as well, that series that Hawkeye did with Abigail. We get an echo as well of introduction of the Wilson Fisk, more of his background story. And with Born Again, I kind of feel like they're using Wilson Fisk as a stand-in for what's going on with Trump. That somebody that presumed alleged criminal ends up becoming mayor of New York. So now, the big thing that maybe might turn up some people, since it has much more of a long episode run, I think 18 episodes, there's more dialogue, more exposition, and it might put off some people. Now, the conversations that the Kingpin is having with his political staff, now he's already mayor, I'm gonna be honest, very boring. I just want to get into the main sections. And of course, we saw the famous now reunion between Matt and the Frank Castle, because there's these police cops being God knows, using the Punisher's symbol for some weird form of their justice. And the next episode coming out, I think it's 7, I hopefully find the team up with Frank and Matt, because at the end, I think it was episode 6, we finally see this big, psycho criminal called Muse that uses the blood of his victims to do, portraits, and we get that fight scene at the end, because this one bit of the character White Tiger, unfortunately the actor died of cancer in real life. That's really sad. And apparently this amulet gives this person powers, and this was going to be passed on to his niece, and the niece ends up getting, investigating her uncle's murder, ends up getting kidnapped by Muse, and Daredevil ends up saving her. So I've cut a lot of things away from this review. Now, this female love interest that's a psychologist, I can't remember her name. Well, weird coincidence, maybe not weird, because the Kingpin is following Matt, because they had that meeting in the cafe in which they talked about, are you being for real or are you just faking being a changed man? And Daredevil, that's Matt telling the Kingpin, if you step out of line, I'm gonna be there quicker than you can say my name. Basically, that's what he said. And the Kingpin was like, likewise, if you get in my way, that sort of thing. And of course, at the end, Matt ends up saving the niece of the guy that played was the White Tiger. And of course, at the same time, there's the whole thing of Wilson having his wife's lover in a cage, which is like, well, I guess they both deserve each other, because Vanessa has become a top crime lord with the absence of Wilson. And what else can we say? Well, up to episode 6, I had to fast forward a lot of some of this dialogue, because I think that's the issue as well. They're like, okay, we don't make it a replica of Netflix, but how do we connect the shows together with our stamp of Disney Plus? I think for sure there's a season 2. When season 2 is out, I think they'll have much more their identity and still staying truthful to the original team at Netflix, how they did this series. Now, Charlie Cox, what can we say? He's meant to be played Matt Murdock. Obviously, he's grown in years, and if that role fits him